Hello everybody, my name is Jacqui Alexander. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for attending the webinar today, and I hope you get a lot out of it. I lead the global corporate team, really forging ahead with the Accelerating Delivery and Performance Program within GSK. And I'd like to introduce Margaret. I'd like to say hi, Margaret.
Hello everyone, this is Margaret Huggins here. I'm one of the lead consultants on the ADP team working for Jacqui.
So let me just share with you quickly what we're going to be covering in this webinar today. In terms of the main objective, we'd like to share our story in how a small team of us in GSK are integrating the principles and practices of organizational development, also known as OD, project management, and Lean Six Sigma to improve business performance. We call it Accelerating Delivery and Performance, ADP. We'd also like to provoke your thinking, really, in how combining forces with other specialists, sometimes in organizations people take a specialism, take one of these three specialisms and apply it very powerfully. But actually we'd like to provoke your thinking in how combining forces of these different disciplines can actually achieve even greater organizational impact. And thirdly, we'd like to provide an opportunity for you to reflect on the insights that could apply to you and equally ask questions that come to you during the session. In terms of the process for the session today, this is a practice we use in our ADP team in GlaxoSmithKline. We use some of those of you who are familiar with Lean Six Sigma. You may know of the supplier input process outcome customer process, or SIPOC. What we use for meeting structuring is we use the middle of that. We think of our meetings and sessions we run as an input, process, and an outcome. So thinking of a meeting and making meetings more effective, to really think about what we're trying to get out of the meeting first. So on the right there you'll see the outcomes that I've just shared with you. In the middle is the process. So after Elizabeth's setup, thank you for that, Elizabeth, basically we're going to tell you a story for about 35 minutes. I'm going to tell the first part of the story for about 15 minutes. We're going to have a 5-minute pause in which we're going to have some questions. Elizabeth will be looking at the questions that come to you, and she'll be posing some of those questions to Margaret and I live. And then I'll hand over. So the first part is going to be the why. Why did we do it? What's it been about? The second part of the story, Margaret's going to tell, which is a bit more detail on what we've done, how we've done it. What are the elements of these three practices that we've brought to bear to help change and improvement in GSK? So why ADP? So first of all, let me just say, GlaxoSmithKline, for those of you who are not familiar, we are a global company. We employ in the order of 100,000 people across the world. We operate in over 60 countries. We're a research and development business. We're a pharmaceutical business within that R&D. We're a consumer healthcare business. We provide consumer healthcare products such as toothpaste, some brands you'll be familiar with. We're a vaccines business. We're working diligently at the moment on the Ebola vaccine as just one of many vaccines that we're working on worldwide. And we're a global manufacturing business as well. So we're a full supply chain in terms of meeting and improving health in the world. So why did we start this? So this picture kind of illustrates some of the key facets of why did we start to do something different in the matter of change. We had a new CEO, Sir Andrew Whitty. Picture of him there looking a little bit concerned and a little bit frustrated. He was a year into his tenure by early 2009, and like all good CEOs, he was frustrated with the speed with which we were executing our strategy and the speed with which we were improving our performance and addressing some of the key challenges in the business. Like most pharmaceutical companies, sure some of you on the line, we were facing patent cliffs with long-term patents, kind of losing our patent status, which was really challenging our business model and leading us to really grow a much more diversified business, a global business, and also to really challenge and simplify our operating model. So needing to really think differently about how our business operated, the sectors that we operated within, and really looking at our whole model. In that first year of Andrew Whitty being in post, he did again what good CEOs do. He was always not only just with shareholders and stakeholders, he was also going around all of our sites, all of our operations worldwide. And he, as an individual, noticed that we were doing some things really, really well. In our global manufacturing organization, we were applying Lean Six Sigma to great effect on the factory floors, really eliminating non-value adding activities, really looking at visual management, and really driving performance improvement on some of our key manufacturing sites. He also noticed that in some parts of the business there was really great OD change going on, really highly engaged workforces, and that change was really effectively implemented. And he also noticed, particularly in our consumer business, great standards and excellence in project management and an ability to transfer a strategy into executable plans and project delivery very effectively. So he and the members of his corporate executive team, they started discussing, we're doing these three things separately, we really need to drive improvement, and we know there's a lot of change ahead. So basically they had a discussion that fundamentally kind of came to the challenge, do we need to change how we change? Many of you, I'm sure, are involved in large-scale change, and I think it's true to say that the statistics only ever seem to go upwards, not downwards, that 70% of change in organizations still fails to deliver the benefits or the desired intent that was intended. And that was a principle we held very close to our hearts in terms of what did we need to do differently in GSK. Because fundamentally, if we did what we always did, we would, basically achieve similar levels of failure, quite frankly. And so our fundamental precept was how did we look at change, and how would we really need to change the process of change in the company. So what we did first of all was we took to heart this thought, well, we needed to look at actually how would we combine, if we were doing Lean Six Sigma really well in some parts of the organization, we were doing great OD in some parts of the organization, we were doing fantastic project management, the what if was what if we put those three together and we made that into ADP. So what else did we do? So it wasn't enough just to throw together these three things. What else did we do? Well, another big thing we did, I don't know about your organizations, but in our organization we didn't have a single framework or a language around change. So in April 2009 we got together all people that cared about change, people who had their own models, external consultants, and we defined the GSK Change Framework. This is a universally adopted model within GSK. It is simple, its elegance is in its simplicity, and we use it in all of our work. So I would say one thing I would recommend, if this is something you don't have in your organization, really consider looking at what's our change framework. In addition to that, we needed somewhere to go and experiment. So basically we mobilized a team of those experts, and our CEO with the corporate executive team identified 10 strategic projects for us to go and apply our newfound thinking. Just to give you a feel, these were broad and very strategic initiatives, things like doubling clinical productivity in our R&D business, launching new products excellently in Europe, introducing a TB vaccines in China, and even improving our talent management process globally within GSK. So as you can tell, a mixture of support function and frontline commercial business and R&D, we tried to get a spread. So we started our experiment, and the experiment was, what if we applied these three things together, the tools and practices, aligned with a change framework that was also being tested out, and we would see if it worked. And those of you, again, who are in science-based organizations, it's a great way to test something. We had a hypothesis, would it work, and we went out to test it out. So let me finish in terms of this part of the story. I've got about 5 minutes left, which is probably going to do justice to what's the journey been. And as you can tell, this is now, this journey is in its 5th year, coming into its 6th year. I would say that we were prepared to pack up the experiment after 6 months, and that was the agreement we had with our sponsors, was that if it didn't work and there wasn't evidence to suggest it was having an impact after 6 months, we were all prepared to close the project down. As you can probably tell, that didn't happen. In fact, what we discovered was there was more than enough that was having an effect that would benefit the organization, and we've carried on. So the experiments, we began in the summer of 2009. We went and learned from other companies. One particular company was Unipart. Those of you based in the UK, Unipart have a consultancy arm that really does a lot of what we were seeking to do in ADP. We also brought in one of the Unipart consultants to be a member of our team to really coach us. We defined the GSK Change Framework. We identified the simple tools from OD, project management and Lean, and we aligned those to the phases of change because each of those projects was in a different phase of change. And we mobilized a team, a global team, initially based in Europe and the US, of about 20 people. And we basically started engaging with all of those 10 projects. The 10 projects were all running, they were all in flight, so some of the reactions you can imagine were not always positive because leaders would suspect why were we there and what could we help with, and they had their own helpers already. But we managed to gain entry and engage with all 10 projects. Key learnings of that phase, that experimental phase, was really to start small and prove something. Don't go after boiling the ocean, start with a few small things. And although it might sound small, some of those projects were very strategic, but start with a few projects and do them well. Active sponsorship, our CET, our corporate executive team, but more importantly our CEO was fully behind this initiative. We worked in trios, so we had mobilized from all parts of GSK, people such as myself and Margaret who were willing to take a risk and do an experiment. From all parts of our business came together, and from all three disciplines. So what we did in the first instance was match up a lean expert alongside an OD expert, alongside a project management expert, to work as a threesome on each of the 10 projects. So we would learn from one another as we went. Our other learning was that of the 10 projects, there were one or two that really, they weren't the right projects. It didn't work as well as it could. And because this was the only time in the 5 years now of running ADP that we've been given projects to work on, I think the key learning there was if it didn't work, then actually we needed to, in an adult way and a professional way, exit sooner. But actually, because they were our first projects, we kept going as long as we could. But actually, you don't always know you're choosing the most perfect projects. Second phase, 2010-11, a breakthrough for us, Margaret will come onto this in more detail, was we began, by the summer of 2010, what we found we had a problem with was defining the way of working that we were seeking to bring to the organization, and equally with that limited our ability to skill other people to do what we do. So we had to really go into a problem-solving, a Kaizen session ourselves to say, how could we accelerate the capability we were trying to build in the organization? And out of that was born what we call the fundamentals for delivery. Margaret will cover that in more detail, but it is the one-page definition of what we do that served us very well ever since. It really, in a simple way, describes what we're trying to bring to the organization. We have beacon projects, so basically in any business we would seek to do a small project to prove the concept of ADP, and then we would scale up with the business in terms of wider adoption. We adopt a forum, field work, and feedback approach. We don't do training, we do skills and capability development, and we do that via workshops. We have people work in the real work in the field, and we coach them and provide constant feedback in how they're doing what they're doing. Our multidisciplinary team, we started cross-skilling ourselves. So those who'd come from project management started learning more deeply the skills of OD and lean, and vice versa. We started building practitioners. Today we have in the order of 70, my team is still similar size, about 16 people globally, but we have over 1,700 practitioners of ADP in GSK, so we're well beyond a tipping point of a capability in the organization. And we also started working on leaders. What we've discovered, and if any advice I would give you, is if you're going to do something similar, focus on leaders from the start. Leaders are the red thread of change in organizations, and your role model leaders are one of the most critical components for really getting things to change. I think I mentioned we do proof of concepts, our learning, and then do the bigger investment. We do not do training. We do not do training of individuals or specialist functions groups. We apply ADP to the real work with intact teams. That's the cellular level of change we believe in organizations. We believe that things should be pulled, not pushed. It's a very emergent approach, and that viral adoption now has led to us operating across the whole of GSK, all business units, all geographies. Choose the right work and learn how to say no was our learning off the back of, make sure you're applying in the right way. And the final phase, although it's still the very present phase in that we're in this one fully, is we're fully into embedding, extending, and evolving and adapting ADP to the ever-changing world of GlaxoSmithKline. We've embedded it increasingly in daily work. We're embedding our approaches into global leadership development, absolutely critical. We've now got a hub of capability in Singapore. We've got tremendous demand for ADP ways of working in East Asia, South America, and now increasingly Africa. So that's led to a deployment of my own team globally, but equally building capability across the world. We're constantly seeking to improve and simplify standards. I think that would be the other key thing, is that one of the secrets of our work is to simplify, not complicate things. The business world is so complex already that leaders are looking for things that make things simpler, not more complex. And what we now look, with that base of over 1,700 practitioners worldwide, we can leverage that capability against key business challenges, but equally to develop capability in others. We've moved a small number of people to seed these new teams globally. What we've born in the West, we are now growing in the East, particularly in East Asia, and I have our head office out in Singapore. And we are being culturally sensitive to adapting our practice out there, as entailing to a cultural fit without compromising the core of what we stand for. And actually, increasingly now, our team is seen as a hub for talent development and leadership development. And so we're increasingly getting a flow of future leaders passing through my team and other teams like my team in GSK, as we seem to have hit something in terms of developing the capabilities of leaders in the matter of change and improvement that the organisation sees it needs for the future.
To remind people what ADP stands for?
Yeah, I said it up front. It's accelerating delivery and performance.
The first question I have comes from Neil, and he points out quite rightly that change relies on people. And
Absolutely.
you did refer to this, but can you expand on how you generated the momentum for change from the very top, and so overcame resistance to change and created unstoppable momentum?
Wow, what a great question. And I refer to this change as a viral change, probably because I'm in a healthcare company. So first thing is, I think you need the right sponsorship at the right level. So we couldn't have had better than our own CEO and corporate executive team. I think secondly, having an ability to experiment with a set of projects. But then ultimately, I think in terms of how do you create momentum, you need to have impact. So if what you're doing and bringing is not affecting and improving things, then people move on to the next thing. I think that's one of our big things, is to show that actually applying accelerating delivery and performance approaches in GSK actually affects and improves the business performance. But what we also know is we also improve engagement and empowerment. These were also things we were able to prove through the years in terms of, actually how do you bring that kind of the energy to actually other people then hearing and wanting to adopt similar things. I know Margaret wants to comment too.
Just to say, I'll be sharing one specific example of that business impact near the end of the presentation as well, so that might be interesting.
Our biggest learning is if you push something and tell somebody it's going to be good for them, it is not as effective as saying, is this something you'd like to try out and see if it works?
How did you build change expertise within the organisation? Did you upskill internally, bring in external SMEs, or a blend of both?
Yeah.
And SMEs being subject matter experts. Yeah.
And again, I should say, the early question about what is ADP, this is a completely internally delivered, and it's a completely internal GSK entity. We got some advice before we started from consultancies, from Cranfield, I think it was, or
Ashridge.
Ashridge. We got advice and some help from Unipart, but ever since the beginning of 2010, it has all been about leveraging what we already have and building on what we already have. It's all about building capability, and big organizations have a lot of capability. It's about just channeling that and aligning it to a common goal and a common standard.
They're asking for examples of the projects and what criteria you use to choose them. So these are projects that were they manufacturing, non-drug related, just a general idea?
Yes, so the ones I mentioned are projects. Yeah. So basically, some were in the R&D business. We didn't have any in manufacturing. We did. We had supply chain transformation, which actually is beyond manufacturing, so it connects commercial with manufacturing. We had an HR project, which was a talent management project. We had a corporate strategic project, which was GSK does a lot of acquisitions. Margaret, in fact, worked on that one, which is building our whole ability to rapidly integrate new acquired companies. So basically, if there was some criteria, I would say we needed to have a spread of projects across different businesses, because we're a big organization and it needed to be proved that it could work across all business units, or at least a representative sample, and we wanted to prove that it could work in support functions. Another one we had was we were embarking on a global SAP implementation, so that was a finance HR implementation as well. Bottom line, our executive team, our CEO and our corporate executive team, they selected the projects, they mapped them against impact, difficulty, and they selected a cross-section for that 10.
How do you define and identify the leaders? And the other one is what you do if they don't learn what you're teaching them or the rest.
Yeah, so we define a leader as anyone who manages others. So we're not, some programs will go after your top leaders. What you'll see when Margaret shares is a lot of our work has direct frontline benefit. So some of the most directly benefited people are those at the front line, be they salespeople, be they R&D people at ventures, be they manufacturing people on the shop floor. Equally, we've over the years obviously had to also align and engage very senior leaders for their sponsorship. To be very honest with you, we have gone where the energy is. We're not here to convert the world. We're here to work with those who see something in this and wish to take on the practices of ADP. And in 4 or 5 years, we now have, I think it's 70% of GlaxoSmithKline are applying ADP in some way, and that is all through people opting in. No leader has ever been told they have to do it. No project has been told they have to apply it. It's all been built on proving benefit, showing a simple approach that works, and providing support and building the capability of those business people so that they don't keep having to come back to the central team for more help. They can do it themselves.
So what demonstrated impact have you seen?
So I may defer that a bit to Margaret, because Margaret does have a case study slide. I can't go into financial details, but all I will say is that we have seen increase in market share in our commercial businesses. In terms of our R&D business, we have seen delivery and even delivery ahead of target dates for reimbursable files, so actually filing for new products. By applying these practices, we've saved time, which is really important when you're going after a new entity and a new drug and a new patent. And we've seen benefit to employees. So we've seen improved engagement and empowerment scores in terms of the softer side of people benefits. So teams where the leader and the team applies ADP feel significantly more empowered by this way of working than those that do not. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour, but across the piece we could cite different tangible impacts.
So keep sending the questions in. We'll answer as many as we can today. So we wanted to shift gears a little bit and now talk about, well, how did we do this? Jacqui's talked about the journey, and we're still obviously on that journey, by the way. By certainly no means are we finished yet. So there are still areas of the business that we're working on, working with, and moving them up their transformation ladder. So I wanted to look at a couple of things here. One of the things, in addition to the change framework and having a unifying way of thinking around change, one of the other things that really helped us on our journey was having some core principles. that really helped to guide us as we worked with very different areas of the business with different objectives and different improvements. So we wanted to share those with you. We had 6 and really interested to get you thinking about, well, which of these might work in your organisation. So the first one turned out to be a really important piece here. So one of the first principles, change starts with self first. This is about individual accountability. If you look closely at our change framework, this is the core, this is the most important element. Don't ask someone else to change if you're not prepared to change yourself first. So that served us very well, that principle. Second one is about sponsorship. Jacqui already mentioned we've got a great sponsor team made up of some of the highest sort of ranked people in the organisation. So that's absolutely helped us move forward and help get some of the blockers out of our way. Third one that served us very well is measures. It might sound strange that not all of the areas we work with have really good time-bound measures in place, and we found that's something that we can bring to teams that's added tremendously to their performance. So keep tying back to some measures. They might be financial, they might be some other business result, they may even be the softer side, the human side of improvement, but having some measures in place has been crucial. Fourth one we worked with, hang on, it stopped clicking. There we are, is the engagement aspect. So people have so much more engagement and buy-in and will produce much more effort if they've actually been involved in the change. So this is often we find ourselves working with teams, and we'll actually encourage the team not to be a very tiny group that decide everything and direct, but actually to involve the people who are actually going to enact this change and be effective. Fifth one we've got there, thanks Jacqui, is focus on the vital few. So this is all about, if any of you are familiar with any lean thinking, really focus on the most important critical goals and don't get distracted by the whirlwind of all of the other activities that you can get drawn into. So encouraging people to really focus on the vital few things that can be changed, very, very helpful. And then lastly is about the fit for purpose. So one of the crucial questions we often find ourselves working with the customer groups on is, you know, what's the problem you're really trying to solve here? What is this intended to do? So we're constantly inquiring about what the fit is and what the value is for the customer. So have a little reflect on that as we go along and just sort of think, okay, which would be most helpful in your organisation? We found number 1 and number 4. So the change starts with self, and I think the ownership and engagement of people in the change has probably been the most valuable ones we found as our work progressed. So moving on from that, Jacqui mentioned this up front, and it's the set of fundamentals. So as well as these core principles in our change framework, we found that we needed to really ground this as a way of working throughout the organisation. And what helped us to do that was actually codifying, I guess, some of the core practices, some of the really useful tools that seem to help. So this was a bit of a shift away from working purely on change, significant large change projects, into, okay, that's great, how do we get this into everyone's day-to-day working? So this has been a tremendous core piece of how we work, and it's around 12. We happen to come up with 12 fundamentals. I'm not going to go through every one, and you won't be able to read them maybe on the screen at present, but you can have a look in the slide pack afterwards. I'll just pick out a few because you can start to see how we piece this picture together from those 3 disciplines that Jacqui mentioned earlier on. So some examples we've got here. The very top one is around voice of customer, and this is absolutely basic. It's saying, okay, work out who your customers are and what they need and want. So actually getting close to the customer, and that might be internal, it might be external, whoever you define as customers. That's what we wanted to do. And you can see a bunch of tools there to actually help people get closer, understand customer needs. Linked really closely with that is the second one, and that's called Gemba, or Go and See. If anyone's familiar with Lean Sigma terminology, you may have heard the term Gemba before. It simply means go to the place where the value is created. Go and see for yourself. So again, that's been a bit of a shift for us to actually encourage leaders and teams to go out there and see where the work's actually happening and use that to inform their improvements. And then you can see that the other fundamentals start to play out. You know, there's pieces in there around determining the change approach that you might want to take. So is it something that you want to be really highly directive about? Probably not such a good idea. Do you want to engage people? Do you want to have some frameworks? So there's various change approaches that we found are really effective, and we wanted people to think about that and make conscious decisions on how to approach a change. Then you'll see some familiar stuff in there from around the project management sphere, so good implementation planning, good visual tracking of performance, setting metrics, so there are areas concerning that as well. And then some more OD stuff, so I guess around individual capability and individual accountability actually, so getting people to really reflect on themselves and how they're doing, and using coaching as a methodology. Jacqui mentioned that we don't do lots of sheep dip type training. Action coaching is our approach. We use that a lot with teams, and that means standing side by side with them, actually coaching them in the moment while they're actually working on their projects, and then gradually stepping back as the capability builds. So you can see there we've got a kind of nice core document. We actually built this into, we've got content on websites, so we've got a great website that people can refer to as a reminder or a bit of a teaching aid, and we use this as the basis of all the coaching and training that we do with teams. So just to bring us back to the original hypothesis, where we said we drew a lot of this thinking from 3 disciplines, if you like, of OD, or organisation design, so that's all about change management, leadership, designing the organisation, so that was one of the areas we drew from. We drew from project management, PM, and we drew from Lean Sigma, so process improvement. So I wanted to just paint that picture as 3 circles for you. So firstly there we've got project management, so I know a lot of you will be familiar, and we just mapped across where some of our fundamentals actually originated from. So as you'd expect, you've got benefits, scoping a project, setting out great implementation plans. That came from the world of project management. Then next we had the lean world. So any of you who tick that box in the poll about, yeah, you combine these 2, you can see some of the overlap there. So you've got problem solving, you know, really starting from the problem opportunity, taking the voice of the customer I already talked about, visual performance management and continuous improvement mindset. And obviously these things do overlap a little, but this is where we pulled them from when we put the fundamentals together. And then OD, so those of you familiar in bringing OD into your practice, you'll see things like coaching, certainly the individual accountability, and we encourage people to journal and reflect on their performance and where they're at. And also inevitably teams, so how's a team really working effectively, and that speaks to some of those engagement improvements that we've seen as well. So I guess the uniqueness that emerged was really bringing these 3 together, and one thing that was common to all, at least one thing, I'm sure there were others, was the whole piece around engaging stakeholders. We found all of us are really concerned with that. So how we did this was literally, our team was made up of people with experiences in these 3 areas, and then we brought them together, worked out our fundamentals. One thing we noticed was that the kind of preferences of these different types of disciplines. So we're all specialists, we're all about business improvement. ADP is really business improvement in the organisation, that's what it's there to do. But you start to see some really interesting, I suppose, differences or preferences when we first came in. So you've got the OD guys coming in with, you know, pretty much a left brain preference. So things like, you've got the OD guys coming with the right brain preference, particularly things like using appreciative inquiry. So often the questioning will be around what's the opportunity here, what can be improved. A coaching approach, we brought that into our practice. Very much a human orientation, and then taking a consultative approach, thinking about the inputs and how people are working together. And then on the other side, we started to say, oh, that's really interesting. We've got a left brain preference here amongst, perhaps, you know, this is a bit broad brush, I appreciate, but, you know, the lean guys, very much a process orientation. So it's about the process. That's the core of this. How can we improve that? It's about what's the problem and how are we going to address that problem and fix it. And it's about training for capability and very much outputs or results goal-driven. And it brought the discipline and the rigor to some of these ways of working. So tremendous value of bringing those things together, and certainly speaking personally, having been on the team since the beginning, for me that was one of the most interesting parts of the journey, was actually bringing the people together and learning about and valuing each of the skills and the capabilities and the tools and the practice that we all brought to the party. So we started off, Jacqui said, working in pairs and trios because we could share and appreciate each other's stuff, if you will. And now what we've done is actually broadened our own capability across all of those three areas. So if you look at an ADP consultant, you'll actually see capability in all of those areas. Just as a note, in the organisation we still have OD specialists, we still have project management specialists, and we still have lean specialists. So those deep specialisms still sitting there as we need to draw on them, or as the organisation needs to draw on them. But what we've done is taken the basics out of all of those areas and pulled them together in that pack and the 12 fundamentals for delivery. Okay, so my last slide really, I know we've had a lot of questions around, so what does this mean? Give us some examples of, you know, what benefit has the organisation had? And obviously that's been a massively important part of our journey, is to show that, particularly in the early days, that proof of concept, POC, you saw on one of Jacqui's slides, that's proof of concept. So here's an example of a business improvement that happened in one territory in our US pharmaceutical business. So the territory is New Jersey, and it was a piece of work started there in really 2010, so a few years ago now. And this was a territory particularly dived into one group of products, the respiratory products. One example of that would be a serotype, one of our products for respiratory disease. The improvement objective here, right at the beginning by the US Pharma president who sponsored this project, so a good example of senior sponsorship again there, was, look, I think we have an opportunity here to improve prescriptions. So you improve prescription rate, you improve sales in the organisation. That's obviously a huge business benefit. It started off with a pilot in this particular area, sales area, and it was with the sales reps. So these are the guys who are out there on the road calling at doctors and briefing them on our products. So the experiment started in 2010 with some Gemba, some go and see, and they were a small team of specialists who actually went and sat with the reps when they were out there going on their rep visits to help them identify what potential problems there were and improvements could be made. So the success story here is around the impact of that. The reps themselves actually owned the problems, they solved the problems, and they owned the management system by which we measured the results. And you can see there by that little graph how the result line's gone up. So that's a clear business benefit in terms of increased market share, actually, of that particular drug. A couple of other things to mention. The team got, in early 2011, won the Team Champion Award, so that's the most successful team in that area. And despite a number of changes, so this is one of our key learnings about sustainability. So despite the team changing, despite the leader actually turning over, so there's a different team leader, and the way that success was measured actually shifted for the whole sales population during that period. Later in the year, second half, same team won the highest performance award again. So this gave us some really good hints as to the sustainability of this. Just to finish the story, again on a sustainability point, important to go back and check. So was that improvement sustained over time? So we went back and checked 2 years later, still very high performance in that area. Again, the team doing extremely well. A 2-year follow-up showed that those improvements were actually sustained. And what has happened since then is those ways of working, and that investigation has been spread to other areas in the US pharma business.
So there was one around culture, because obviously in GSK you're working internationally, so how can you ensure consistency versus tailoring your approach in this cultural environment?
Yes, so it's a great question. I'll give you my 2 pennyworth, because probably coming up to particularly 18 months ago, when we were really beginning to work increasingly in emerging markets in East Asia, China, South America, I was particularly, and I remember Margaret and I spoke at a conference and we posed a similar question to the audience there, you know, how do you bring something respectfully from a cultural perspective that's born in the West or in a European US style of culture to a different culture and respect the local culture. So I was in an inquiry about how would we do that, and I actually went to the East, went to Singapore, met people from many countries in the region, and I posed the same question. And my concern was that some of the things we do are quite Western, just say in-your-face feedback. So we do believe in action feedback, noticing behaviours in the moment, doing in the moment after action reviews on how things are working. And I was a little bit worried about some of the cultural sensitivities we might run into, and I didn't want to. I wanted to respect local culture. So I asked the group in the East, how do we make this acceptable? And the answer I got actually was a surprise. The answer was not, you know, you need to change everything you're doing. The answer I got was, you just need to tell us one way, Jacqui, because you give us multiple ways, and some of our, particularly in the East, some of our schooling is there is one way. You know, don't give us 3 options of different tools or approaches we could use. Tell us what you think would be the best place to start on the one way. So that said, so what we are discovering is that what we've defined seems to be universally kind of acceptable, and whilst GSK, you know, is an English-speaking company, we do, you know, again, we seek to recruit locally and employ local nationals. We don't do as much, you know, kind of expats abroad, but it seems to be working. I do field consultants to the region when we do need to send experts from abroad who are aware of cultural difference, and that they, by their very nature, they navigate the sensitivities by their own sense, not by changing what the fundamentals are, but they sense the right way to do it. So I think my reply would be, you can keep hold of the source and don't have to compromise the essence. I think you need to field culturally sensitive individuals to navigate the terrain, and then it will work. But we're still working. I mean, this year was Africa is probably going to be a big, increasing priority for us. So again, everything is, you know, approach with inquiry is my tenet, I guess.
I was going to say, I think also, you know, I just wrote the word down, translation.
Translation, yeah,
because we have
yeah.
done increasingly some more and more, or businesses have translation as well.
Yeah.
So that, and that's, you know, that has its own challenges, doesn't it? It's translating some of the nuances of perhaps some of our fundamentals into other languages. So don't underestimate that, but it is important because then, like Jacqui said, you've got that core that everybody can come back to, but perhaps how they do it and how they get to it needs to be sensitive to the location you're working in.
Well, what I have noticed, just as an addition to the answer, is that what we've noticed is the adoption of ADP in emerging markets is far faster, and there is less resistance. It's far tougher to introduce something new in Europe and North America than it has been in emerging markets, because the hunger for applying things that will help people deliver better, faster, and to very challenging goals, people will really adopt. So we've actually experienced less resistance and far more pull in our emerging markets than we have in Europe and North America.
Okay, that's great. Another question is, how do you manage the budgets for the projects? Do you have a central pot? Do individual businesses pay for it themselves? And how do they manage the time for people to take out of their day jobs?
Yeah, so projects are funded by the sponsoring executive team member. So I don't manage, nor do we centrally manage change projects and budgets in GSK. Obviously within a division, be it an IT group, whatever, they may have their own governance structures and budgeting. So all we manage is, what I manage is where do my 15, 20 consultants spend their time. So what I'm always looking for is where will be the biggest impact and the biggest return of my consultants' time, because I don't charge the businesses for our time. We are funded directly by the CEO out of his personal budget, because in the scheme of the budgets in GSK, we still, although we cost, we don't cost in any way. It's just not worth doing cross-charging and things like that. But no, so short answer is budgets are managed project by project. Our own consulting capability, I'm more concerned with making sure we're doing the right work.
I think the other thing I'd add to that, Jacqui, is it's important to decide the way a group like ours works. So it's very much along the model of go in, pick the right projects to work with, go in, but always with an objective of stepping back and building the capability in the team or the people you're working with in order for them to do that.
Exactly.
So it's not like sometimes with an external consultant you might get a bit more business development going on with the work. We don't need to do that. So our ethos is always go in with a view to how do I make this group sustainable and capable so that I can go and work elsewhere.
Our mission, I didn't mention at the beginning, our mission as a team is not to exist. And when we reach that, we have reached sustainability of the change and the approach in GSK. So I'm still longing for that day, because that's when we will ultimately be successful.
Obviously you're using a continuous improvement methodology. How are you going to make sure that ADP continuously improves?
So that was one thing I did note down. One of the roots of, I think, success is that we are constantly evolving what we do and how we do it. And that's in our operating model, our team and the work we do, ourselves as individuals, and the standards and the practices we bring to the organization. So one of the sources of, and we were given this feedback in the early days, was the source of our credibility is we practice what we preach. There's nothing we do or teach that we don't do on ourselves, and continuous improvement is a key aspect of that. Would be my answer. Margaret, don't you want to add anything? I
just think that plays through. If we're sitting here in our team room, plastered on the walls are our improvement targets for ourselves. We review and reset those every year. We've got a strategy running this year in terms of our own team. How do we be the best we can possibly be? So yeah, I'd like to think we do the best we can at building that into the way we work, actually. But a really great question and very important. You can't stand still. No. And I think thinking in that slightly emergent way, you can see from the journey line that Jacqui shared, we didn't have a huge grand plan at the beginning. No. We worked in chunks. We tried the 10 projects and we learnt from that. Then we moved to a wider number of projects and we learnt from that. Then we developed the fundamentals and we learnt from that. So